I am 1 second. Got it. Okay.
Okay, just so you know, just so we're informed here, I have basically asked Teacher Will to join me today, and I have made him very tech savvy today because we're we're going live on different platforms, and I really wanted this to be happening on different platforms live because I wanted to cherish this moment. We had spoken in other moments, let's say, together, but it wasn't anything formal, so we didn't really get to know each other. We're going to keep it short and sweet, about 40-45 minutes. So if you have any questions for us while we talk about native speakerism and generally, the ELT world and the discriminations that occur along those lines, I would like to, first of all, start by saying to the audience or presenting, what we do, what you normally find us on the social media for. Well, I have to say, like I was saying to Teacher Will before, that I was a bit starstruck that he would actually admit, to accept the invitation from the get-go. But yeah, you're being modest. But for example, when I told my sister I was going to have you, I said, there is this, person that I really like. And she said, I know who Teacher Will is. Are you kidding me? I'm like, yes, that's fair enough, So just getting to know each other a little better. I'm quite new to the Instagram world in general, so I want to know like how you got started first of all. So we kind of start with our general, let's say, introduction of what it is that we do on social media in general.
Got it. So first of all, thank you very much, teacher, for the invitation. I'm humbled. I'm honored. Thank you. And don't be starstruck, because at the end of the day, we're human beings. We're all trying to share our perspective and things of that nature. And I believe that, for me, it's important if I can use my small platform, share my voice to help other people, then, that's important because people have helped me in my journey. Briefly about me, who am I? My name is Teacher Will. I'm from the United States of America. My mother tongue is English. I speak another language other than English. Um, Interestingly enough, before I was a teacher, I was in the business world for years. 2011, I went back to school. I got my T-cell certification for various different reasons. I was looking at I received 3 international assignments. So currently, right now, I am an American who lives in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And so I've been teaching here, worked for a language school, international school, private company, teaching various different English courses. Um, that's a little bit of kind of about me. How I got into social media, interesting enough, briefly, in August of 2016, when I worked for a language school, there were a couple of students of mine that are in my extended family that I call the core, said, Teacher Will, you should really get on social media. You should get on Instagram. I'm like, no, I'm too old. I'm not. I'm late to the game. No one's going to hear what I said. They kept begging me and begging me and begging me. Confirmation for me came in threes. And so I posted my first video in August 30th of 2016. I had no idea what I was doing. If you look at my first video, it was like my face is this way. Anyway, I got serious on social media about 2017. And then I've been on, since then, and I would be nothing without the ATW family. Because without them, certainly being on any social media platform, it's a choice. You would need to ask people why they follow me and why they choose to follow me.
Sure.
The information's free. That might be one reason. However, or in addition to, I hope people follow me because I consider myself not a traditional teacher. I like to encourage, my job as a teacher, I believe, is to motivate, inspire, help people achieve their English goals. I encourage critical thinking. I encourage people to really take ownership. And so, the way that I develop content, excuse me, is kind of a way where I look at my own life and then listen to the ATW family. And I call them ATW family and not fans or followers. That just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I develop content with the hopes of motivation, inspiring. And then since I've been on social media, each year I have a particular theme that I try to have the followers and the family focus on. And this year's theme for 2022 is courage. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I saw that, I've been following you. Like I said, I started only since July or August 2021, so I'm quite new to this. So I had no, let's say, introduction to as to what you were doing before that. I just got to know you in these days. And I wanted to ask you how, because you often talk about, you do a lot of, vocabulary, you do a lot of lives, you have a lot of, let's say, daily content that you put out there, whether it's reels, whether it's just, on your stories. It's quite active. You've always been, I guess, this active. But what surprised me is that you are very aware of the whole, um, native speakerism, what we're talking about. So I wanted to understand, like, how did you become so conscious of that? How did that start? Because you address it quite frequently in your in your content.
It's an interesting question. How did I become aware of it? Well, I would say a couple things. I before I get into that, let me define how I'm defining that. A native
Hmm.
speakerism. I would define native speakerism as an economic form of power that is independent from race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, non-religion, things of that nature, in which English is perceived to be, um, if you look at it as an economic system, and the reason why I say that is because we'll get into that conversation, but it's an economic system in terms of form and control where a dominant language, a dominant accent, and I should preface by saying the following thoughts that I'm going to say are my own. They are my perspective. They are my experience. It is my truth. Notice I said it is not the truth. Perhaps there are things that might be said during this streaming where people can agree, people can disagree, and it's okay if we agree. Great. It's okay if we disagree, and it's okay to disagree. So I wanted to say that, preface by saying that, because oftentimes, people, we might be talking about things that people might not be aware of and or they thought of, but it hurts too much. So with all that being said, native
Yes.
speakerism to me, I would define as a economic system of control and power in which there is a particular narrative out there as it relates to English, typically coming from a indicating, in my opinion, where English is associated with one particular sound, one particular region, one particular accent, and one particular color. That does not negate the historical origins of English, because certainly every language, in this case English, has its origins. And someone who has his undergraduate degree in English and history, I love history. Where that to me, so that's how I define it. Next question: how did I come, or how did I become aware of that? Many different reasons.
Hmm.
I think my experience of, I am American. I define myself as an American, as an African American. So my life experience taught me that there are certain discriminations exist in the world. Number two, how did I come into this? Well, there have been, for those that choose to follow me, part of the ATW family, I heard from people, regardless of their nationality. Um, and I only say this for the purposes of this conversation. I've heard a lot of people that were born outside of non-native English speaking countries that were addressing the fact that, oh, I feel a little different, or oh, I don't sound like a native, or oh, I have to have an American accent or British accent. And I was lucky enough and humble enough that they shared some stories with me on that. How else did I find that out? Well, I had the opportunity to look at, when I started social media, I didn't know what I was doing. And
Hmm.
but I was looking at a lot of content at the time. And let me preface by saying that content providers can do, he or she can do whatever they want to do. But I was looking at overall messages and themes in terms of, at the time when I started, in terms of what was the, major content out there. Sound like a native,
Yeah.
um, fix your accent, how to sound more American, how to sound more British. And interestingly enough, when you talk about native English speaking countries, primarily, at least from the research that I conducted, it was typically America and Britain. Where's Canada? Where's Australia? As an
Yes.
example, and then in addition to that is that what's interesting is that, from a numerical perspective, there are people whose native, whose mother tongue is not English. There are also, when we talk about native language, interestingly enough, Singapore as an example, Barbados as an example, Jamaica
Yeah.
as an example, their official language is English. And yet that is not necessarily what I saw in terms of content delivered,
Yes.
nor would I think that that would be what most people learning English would think of.
Yes, I think
So
there's a lack of awareness, let's say, also in the student per se, because obviously you talked about a higher level or a hierarchy of people kind of fitting in this information, this history, this narrative that has been put out there, whether it started with the European colonialism or the fact that certain countries just have that elite status of knowing English or having English spoken in those countries, and then the rest. I feel like what you're just saying was like my presentation at the ELT conference I did.
well, I wish I could have seen that, and I know we talked about that.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I think so. A couple points there. I mean, first of all, I mean, and I would love to hear if the learners are, want to make comments about that, or
Absolutely.
by all means, comment about that. But my first a couple things. I think it's important from a historical perspective to at least from my own sense of integrity to sit back and say, you know, there are empires in the world. There are, and so empires, whether they're European, whether they're Arab, whether they're French, whether they're Chinese, we've all had that. People have conquered lands and other stuff. So I think that's important to say, because oftentimes what happens is languages evolve and grow, empires grow and die. And so there was there was a spread of French for a particular reason. Why? Because it was conquest. There was a particular aspect of Arabic. Why? Because it was conquest, or Chinese. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, English has been in the now because that's what most people remember, and it's a dominant language right now. Who's to say what's going to happen 100 years from now? But going back to native speakerism, I do think, from my perspective, is that, again, if people view it as an economic form of control and power, where there is either a conscious or subconscious hierarchy involved, where, my thought would be, as most learners associate, and this might be difficult, or maybe people haven't thought this, again, my thoughts. Most people, from what I've talked to, and I'll say why this is, most people, I believe, associate English from a particular region, United States, Britain, the United Kingdom, native English speaking countries with native. Most people associate with a particular accent that is typical native accent. And interestingly enough, as an American, I think it's important when people say they want to sound like a native. I would certainly say that is something that is optional. I don't personally think it's mandatory.
Yes.
If indeed a person aspires to have a native accent, if you're going to use the United States, in which I'm from, figure out what particular accent you want, because in America we have over 30 different accents or dialects. So one particular accent, one particular region, one particular color. And I say that not to be, why do I say those particular things? I think it's important for people, if they want to think critically, and maybe they haven't, or maybe they haven't even thought of that. Most content, if you think about, let's say, for example, if you think about English as a foreign language, or English as a second language, or English learning teaching, or someone who is just learning English, where are those books typically derived from? Typically native English speaking countries, the United States, Britain. So that's one factor. If you then look at it and sit back and say that, okay, where is where is most content in terms of whether it's YouTube, Instagram, or whatever, where are most of those content, are there any similarities in that? Where do they typically come from? The United States, Britain, Australia. What do they look like? What is their particular race and ethnicity? And that is not to negate, and I need to say this, because yes, I'm African American, I'm Black, I have white in my blood, I have European in my blood. I think part of the aspect is that's not to negate my brothers and sisters that happen to be white, because in one way, shape, or form, we all have privilege. But I think what's important is that people, if you look at content providers, that's not to negate the work or their longevity. If you look at where their information is deriving from, what the content is, where the region's coming from, then to me, it would make sense that someone learning English from France, from Saudi, from China, from William Land, if I have my own country, would associate English with that particular thing. And so the final point I would say at this time, why it's important to me is this, because for me, two reasons. Number one, I speak French. When I wanted to learn French, I had and this was years ago, so perhaps it's changed, but I'm talking personal experience. When I learned French, I had no desire. It was never in my mind that when I spoke French, I wanted to speak like a native Parisien, or I wanted to speak like a native Tunisian. It was just, I had no desire to do that. I just wanted to speak French fluently. And the goal of any language is to, from my perspective, is to communicate your thoughts and ideas. So one was from personal experience. There I was kind of like, okay, isn't it interesting? Research shows that there's over 6,500 languages in the world. And yet, there are more people born outside of a native English speaking country than there is a native speaking country. My mother tongue is English, right? So, and yet there's more people out there. English is a global international language. When you ask most people, or I've asked most people, I'm like, hey, are you proud of who you are? Are you proud of your culture? Yes, I love my culture. I love my country. Great. Interesting enough, in my perspective, when it comes to, language, I just ask questions. I'm like, is English a global international language? Yes. Are you proud of who you are? Yes. But yet you want to sound native. And I'm going to say something, and this might make people crazy. Again, it's optional. It's not mandatory.
Sure.
For the purposes of, if we look in research terms and definitions, for those individuals learning English, by definition alone, based on the definitions that the industry has created, you will never be a native English speaker. Why? Because you were not born in a native English speaking country. Is that important? Is that important from my perspective? No. If I wanted to learn Italian, I learned French. I will never be a native French speaker. That does not mean, because why? I wasn't born in France. I wasn't born in Belgium. I wasn't born in Tunisia, as an example. That does not mean I will not have native-like proficiency. That does not mean I might not be able to speak French better than someone who was born in Paris or Morocco, as an example. True. But by the very definition alone, I'll never be that. So interestingly enough, but yet if you ask most learners, oh, I got to sound like a native, where do they get that from? Well, that to me is
we can say that it's not definitely, excuse me for interrupting, because you gave me a lot of ideas to think about here and to talk about and to address. The fact that, this concept, I think that any language that our learners, students speak, in whichever language, there are different accents and there are different dialects. To me, what is strange is that sometimes, they're not as open to considering that they're the same problems in another language that they might be learning, and basing all their, let's say, learning activities on the fact of sounding like something, which, as you said, it's not a skill set. Native speaker, to be a native speaker, you're either born that, or there's no way that you can become or sound like it. And in one of my posts, I spoke about, the CFR definitions of what, they changed them in 2001. Only in 2001 did they, change words such as it's B2 level, be more comprehensible to a native speaker, and they've changed it with be a more proficient user or communicate effectively. Because we know, I always make this example. I live in Italy. I always make this example. I say, okay, you speak Italian. You were born in Italian. Can you teach Italian? And they immediately, there's a light bulb there that kind of turns on, and oh yeah, no, I couldn't. So why are you looking for that in a teacher? So you want a teacher who simply knows how to, or that's enough? And
well, I think that's I'm sorry, teacher. I think that's a byproduct of either conscious or subconscious native speakerism. I normally say, to your point, just because I'm born from a native English speaker, just because I'm American. Contrary to popular belief, some people ask me, are you American? That's another story in itself. But just because I'm American does not mean I know how to teach. That's my native language. That's my mother tongue. Teaching is an art. It's a skill. It's a job. It's a profession. And based on qualifications. Qualifications defining as, education, certifications, work experience, skills, and talents. I chose, because it was mandatory and also a desire, yes, I have an undergrad in English and history. Yes, I have a graduate degree in business, but I chose to go back and get certified on that. Now I'm a certified TESOL qualified instructor. Not that I'm boasting, but for me, it was something that I wanted to do, and it was necessary because I didn't know the foundations of teaching. I knew nothing aspect about like
validate what
management.
You do, and it improves your skills. You might be coming from an advantageous point of view because you're in a position of learning the grammar after you have actually, learned the language in itself.
Right. Exactly. I could explain it. Perfect example that I would encourage anybody. And again, might sound a little controversial. So let me preface by saying this way. Qualifications for me includes education, certifications, work experience, skills, and talents. So for me personally, I am not saying that one cannot be a teacher if they don't have certification. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that I would encourage people to think critically or ask themselves a question this way. If people consider teaching to be, in many different cultures around the world, teaching is held in high esteem. Teachers might not necessarily be compensated adequately for that, but in most parts of the world, teaching is up there. Oh my God, you're molding the next generation. You're shaping children's lives, right? So I kind of use this analogy. I was like, okay, if I want to go to a doctor, am I going to go to a doctor that has no education certifications, that has no work experience, that has
Or
no
am I
skills
going
and
to, the
talents?
first question I am going to ask the doctor is, where are you from? Not if
Right,
you're
right.
qualified
So
to
most
operate.
people,
Yeah.
right, most people would say no.
Constant.
The same with the lawyer. If I'm going to go to a lawyer, would I say, hey, what's your experience? What school did you go to? Interestingly enough, because of native speakerism and other issues, oftentimes what happens is, again, here's the byproduct. Oftentimes what happens is that people on social media, which is their choice, or in terms of looking for teachers, if they're going to do courses, they typically look at, or the question that they ask is, okay, where are you from? What's your nationality? So if they have a United States flag, a British flag, whatever, then typically those people as a whole are typically, oh, okay, well, you know what? You're from America, can teach.
Yes.
Really? So draw the correlation. Now, again, people can do what he or she, whatever wants to do, but that's a product of native speakerism, in my humble opinion. And
can I
again,
ask you
yes, ma'am.
one thing? Again, I'm very sorry. I would listen to you all day,
No,
every
I'm
day,
sorry.
because you're saying things that I totally agree with. But the fact that, do you think that when you did, because I started teaching as well without having any qualification, any certification, I just got a call. Yeah, you sound native speaker enough. Why don't you come and join our school? And I was shocked. I was appalled by it. I thought it was like a phone call interview in a phone call. And I remember totally being shocked. I was, in a job where I just hated. It was my first experience. I was 23 years old and I would have accepted anything. And I just told them, I'm not a teacher. I'm not qualified. How can you even hire me? And they said, oh, just don't worry about that. And they hired me on, like, the next day I was there signing a contract and having, to go and do my individual classes with students. Terrifying. I immediately started to, I found that it was something that I could like, and I went into that. But I think that because I spoke English before, I started learning English when I was about 7 or 8. But I consider it my mother tongue because I don't speak my own language, which is Armenian. I don't know the alphabet. I don't know how to read and write it. And I express myself terribly in it. So I kind of adopted English as my native language. I now speak Italian as well. I've studied other languages, but I would say I'm fluent in both English and Italian, not my own. And I always get a bit angry when people ask me and I say, okay, I now work in an international school. And when I say I'm an English teacher, they say, from where? And I know that they're not expecting to hear Armenia. Okay, first of all, they don't know where it is normally, or they say, is English taught in Armenia? And I say, no, it really isn't. It's not an official language, but what does that mean? So I try to maintain my calm, because you get used to this question being asked, especially in a place where people expect the mother tongue teacher to be teaching the language, full stop. And that's like the only benefit that there is
Right.
speaking to someone who is mother tongue. It's like the only thing that confirms or is better than a qualification. And what I see is that when I started to get, I did a CELTA course, and I did my Delta. Last year, I got my master's degree in teaching. I wouldn't say that those were as effective as the Delta course, the Cambridge courses that I did. But it gives you really a perspective of how hard it really is to properly teach.
Yes.
How hard it is to properly, it's dedication and knowing what sentence structure you're using, what grammar is behind everything, knowing how to answer questions instead of just giving, I call conversation lessons, right? Because anyone can have a conversation. That does not make it a lesson, in my opinion. And
I agree.
I used to do those when I was not a qualified teacher. But now, when I do have a conversation class, what I do is what they want. First of all, I stop the student when they're at an A1, A2 level and they want to just have a conversation. I stop them right there. And yes, you can implement conversation, obviously, in your learning, etc. But then you have to give that extra input and explain things depending on level, age, whatever.
Exactly.
No two
It's called
people learn in the
assessment.
same way.
It's called assessment. That's the teacher. I'm sorry. That's the value of it. Listen, people say like, "Oh, teacher, well, you're an amazing teacher," or "I like you." I'm like, I appreciate the compliment. I will always give credit. I will always give credit to C English Academy. When I got my TESOL certification, I will give credit to Deborah, who was one of my directors, and Mira, who was one of my directors. It was the best investment that I ever, well, one of the best investments that I ever made in myself. The understand classroom management, understanding diversity, understanding teaching techniques, understanding listening techniques, understanding how to teach grammar to someone whose language is not. One of my assignments that I remembered is that, listen, my program, I love my program. We were monitored. I got assessed. We had microphones and cameras in the class, so that when people were teaching, then it was like, what? And they were like, how did you think you did? Self-assessment, feedback, whatever, right?
Same.
So I think that for me, again, it worked for me. I consider teaching a profession now. I have no right to sit back and say if people get certified, not certified. I chose to do it.
But that already says a lot, doesn't it, about you? I mean, there are plenty of teachers. I know of some who have been working, who've had the, financial possibilities to actually go and get a qualification, but they have just
why would they want to do
unnecessary?
Teacher, here's my thing. Why would they? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah. Why would they? Okay, I say all that to say that is their option. What I encourage people to do is this. For learners that are learning English, they have an opportunity to demand that. They are the student, they are the customer, they are the consumer. Now, the byproduct of native speakerism. Okay, listen. I definitely know my passport is American. It's blue. I have a privilege of being a native. I recognize the fact that, hey, I've gotten certain opportunities and certain jobs just because my passport and my nationality is American. So you asked a question earlier is that, well, how did this come in? Listen, for me, too much is given, much is required. Yes, my passport is American, but I experienced discrimination in my own life. So I might have a certain sensitivity to that other people might not. Not right, not wrong, just my experience.
No. And you have to be already aware of that, because I think initially I was ready to even lie about my identity, which I did, basically. They just said, don't mention that you're Armenian when you go to your first classes. Right. And I didn't. And I did think that if I had told my student that I was not from a native speaking country or etc., when people ask me, where are you from? I used to say, my origins are Armenian.
Right. No, and that's and
my parents are Armenian. I was born in Armenia.
Right. I hope to visit Armenia because I know actually in Chicago where I live, there are tons of Armenians there, and I have to visit there. So we definitely will talk because I want to see the top of the mountain. Yeah. Anyway, but what I'm saying is that so I recognize that privilege, right? Here's the thing. Native speakerism, again, economic form and control of power. Now, we've talked about the industry. I want to talk about the impact that it might have on learners. Now, this might be a little dangerous. This might be a little difficult. What impact does that have on learners?
Say it out loud. Mm-hmm.
Well, the impact means is that you'll never be good enough. The impact might be that you're comparing yourself to me. One of the biggest things that I hate when people, one of the things I understand why people say, oh, teacher, I want to speak like you. I want to sound like you. No, you don't. I understand where that comes from.
Sure.
I definitely do, because there's the gold standard. The gold standard is, hey, if you're from a native English speaking country and you speak British English with a British accent or American accent, then you are, why would people want to sound like a native? Because they're taught, they've experienced, whether it's real or right. Listen, if you sound like a native, you can get that job that you wanted. If you sound like a native, you won't be discriminated against. If you sound like a native and have native accent, then hey, you know what? You will not be considered the other. You will not be considered the foreigner. Well, you know what? That might be the case. And I'm not knocking anyone about that because that's real. But in my own experience, my mother tongue is English. I've been discriminated against based on my accent, based on my color. When people come to me when people are interested in taking courses, if they want to take courses with Teacher Will, and they say that, it's like, oh, I want to sound like you. I'm like, listen, you want to take a course with me? What I'm going to teach you is before everything. Grammar, vocabulary.
Yes.
I'm going to teach you mindset. I'm going to teach you belief in yourself. Because what's the impact that native speakerism has? You're not worthy enough. You're comparing yourself to your other people. Why would somebody be comparing themselves to me? And English is not your mother tongue. That's like, I'm going to compare myself to someone whose mother tongue is French. And it's really?
No, it's just being unaware of what language is in the first place. I mean, pronunciation and accent, I think, really come into play. And I want to go a bit deeper on this, by the way, because it's normally what, in terms of what I've experienced as discrimination, what it has been, the foundation of it has been a lot on pronunciation and accent,
which are different, and people conflate them, and it's done in the okay, that's not true. Accent, for the purposes of this conversation, accent and pronunciation are different. Now, if one thinks of native speakerism as a form of power control, there might be the system itself might want to conflate it. Why? Or make it confusing. Why? Because power concedes nothing. If I'm the king or queen and I look a certain way and I speak a certain way, I'm going to do what's advantage. But accent, for the purpose of this conversation, is the distinctive way in which you speak. Your accent is shaped by your culture, where you live, your socioeconomic level.
And it can change depending on
it can change. I was born down south. Where is my southern accent?
Gone.
I live most of my, so it's the distinctive way in which you speak. For me, accent for me is part of my culture. It's part of my identity. When I go see my aunts and uncles down south, my accent comes back. We mimic, and by the way, y'all, we mimic our language. We mimic our language and characteristics based on people, what we do. So accent for me is part of your identity. For those people, again, optional. I have no problem if you want to sound like a native, but here's the thing. When people come to me, I'm like, I want to sound like you. No, first thing I do is teach mindset, because so many learners are walking around here with a sense of shame, with a sense that they're not good enough, with a sense of they're comparing themselves, or that they're more focused on sounding like a native and having a native accent, and they have no aspect of what? Fluency. Part of fluency is pronunciation, how you pronounce and say words. They have no aspect and no understanding of intonation, the rising and falling of your voice, or enunciation, or stress. But because of the conditioning of the system, and then those that benefit from the system, and let me say, by the way, it is not just my white brothers and sisters. It is those people that benefit from the system. Ask me how I know. How many non-native teachers have I seen? Content providers can do what he or she they want to do. But how many non-native individuals have I sat and watched content on? Oh yes, you too can sound like a native, like me. Oh, I'm not native, but listen. So it's a perpetuating itself.
Yes, it's really weird, I would say. It's a very strange thing to witness, and people should call it out a bit more. I have a whole thing in my highlights of ads and things that, that the malpractices and people who kind of have that as their goal.
But why would somebody call a teacher? I agree with you. Here's the thing. Ultimately, because yes, for me, and then I'll go back to something else you said. You said, okay, well, why did you notice it or whatever like that? For me, listen, when I could play the native card technically, right? I'm born in the United States. Some people don't think I'm American, whatever. They think I'm other things. That's fine. That's their business.
Yeah.
But I could play the native card. I could sound like a native, speak like a native, have your native accent. And technically, hey, you know what?
But you wouldn't, because you have been educated.
I would not because for me, I choose not to. Why? Because if I've experienced oppression or discrimination based on my accent, based on my color, based on the stories that I hear of people that decide to take courses with Crazy Teacher Will or choose to follow me and be part of the ATW family, for me, I'm not going to use language that is going to either consciously or subconsciously hurt somebody. That is not within my sense of integrity. It's speaking English naturally. I have no problem if somebody says speak English natively. I don't know the intent. and only I know, I don't know what does that mean? Sound like a native. What does that mean?
Yes.
Now,
A
I don't know
native
what
from
anybody
where?
intends me from where. And
Yes.
you asked the question, well, why people should speak up. One last thing, and I'll be quiet. You asked the point of like, okay, well, people should speak up. I agree with you. The question is why don't they?
Why don't they? I think that it's just I want to think that for the majority of the cases and for, those customers that, schools hide behind this saying that it's because our clients or our customers want a native speaker. Yes, because you have been brainwashing them with this information that somehow a native speaker is better than a formal teacher. And I do agree with you, the qualifications don't matter always, because it's just a matter of then what you do with them. What do you do with the knowledge? Do you actually have your learners, your learners benefit in mind, or what they're learning? Do you have them, do you consider them something, is it something that you're willing to work on, or because you can just be a lazy teacher, know all these things and keep them to yourself egotistically, right? So it's basically your choice, or how you mentioned integrity, or you have the ethical behavior, of what you can know what a good lesson looks like, and you can know how to do it, but then it's basically how much work do you want to put in your lessons and actually do the work that would benefit most, your students would benefit most out of. And to come back to the whole idea of this accent, I think that it was Crystal who said that it was accent only matters if you're either trying to be an actor or you want to be a spy. There's the only reason why someone would learn a certain accent, which didn't come naturally to them, would be if they were, trying to have a film career or.
And well, it does. Well, okay, yes, in theory. Why does it matter? Well, it matters sometimes, and it goes to your next point. Why does it matter sometimes? Because, with all due respect, those individuals learning English, in my humble opinion, can be some of the most discriminatory. If this applies, it applies. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Yeah. Those learning English as a second language or foreign language can be some of the most racist, discriminatory people going, oh, I don't like that accent. I don't like Indian accent. I don't like Egyptian accent. I don't like Chinese accent. Really? Somebody might not like your accent. Really? Somebody might not. Maybe you don't like the accent because you're only used to listening to American accent, in which technically that's in the minority. So learners are brainwashed and conditioned. If, again, going back to native speakerism, economic form of control and power, establishing a standard that, hey, the gold standard is having a certain accent from a particular region, from a particular hue, things of that nature. And it perpetuates them down. Mm-hmm. Why is that difficult for people? Why don't people want to change that? Listen, I don't know. Here might be some following reasons: lack of education, shame, following the system, money, don't necessarily have the vocabulary, don't want to rock the boat. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And all of those reasons are fine. My thing is this: I don't care what other people do. The issue that I have is, I'm like, listen, if learners have a sense of pride or utilize, I'm not saying pride, well, I'm going to say that. If learners own the language, be represented. But so many learners around there, if I'm walking around thinking like, you know what, and I'm going to say something not to offend, some learners are walking around here with a sense of shame and a sense of they are slaves mentally, in their mind. Mm-hmm. And so therefore,
the same. Let me interrupt you there, because some teachers have the same thing.
Some teachers, they do, but I don't care. Not that I don't care. My thing is this: I think it's equal. You want to talk about teachers a minute? Fine, we will. Where my focus is on the learner, the student. Be proud of who you are. Yep. That does not mean that you're not going to face discrimination. That does not mean that, hey, you know what? Listen, I've been called every name under the sun since over 50 years of my life. The N word, the C word, the O word, all of those things. Mm. People's opinion of me is just that. Mm. Now I grew into that.
Yeah.
Okay, that took time. But my thing is, learners why I focus on the learners is I'm like, wait a minute, you have the opportunity to change the industry if you want to change it. But some of y'all don't want to change it. Why? Because you're still enslaved in your mind, thinking that you ain't that there's something the matter with you.
Yeah.
There's nothing the matter with you, because you know what? English is a global international language and you're learning it. And and why are the learners the ones that are responsible? Because wait a minute, you're the student, you're the learner, you're the one with the money. But some of you do not believe as though that you think that you have a voice. Some of you think as though that literally, I've seen it on live Instagrams, I've seen it on live YouTubes, where literally you will not go to somebody because it's like, oh my God, I don't want to offend them. I'm sorry. If I'm going to take a course with somebody, whether it's an English course, a biology course, if I'm going to, and this is just me, oftentimes learners say like, oh my God, English courses are so expensive, even though you can find a course out there for $1 an hour if I use US dollars, all the way up to $1,000 an hour.
Yeah.
What I literally do not understand, and I don't need to understand it, but I'm just saying as a human, for those individuals that decide to take courses or go to language schools or go to international schools, and what I don't understand is if why you pay your money, your hard-earned money and your cash, for someone to oppress you and tell you you're less than.
Yeah.
I do not understand that.
Totally. I don't understand it either.
Now, that's a product. What's the product of native? That's a byproduct of native speakerism. You want to talk about teachers? I'm only going to talk about myself. Teachers can do whatever he or she wants to do. I recognize the privilege that I have, but really, do you think? I'm going to talk from a personal perspective. Who is this guy, William, who's a native, doing this? Why don't teachers listen? Shut up, William. Don't be saying that. You're taking my coin. That's slang English from like, what? Why are you trying to rock a boat? Why are you trying to talk about native speakerism? Why are you trying to talk about discrimination? Why are you trying to talk about race? I just want to teach my classes. Really? Some people that are native and some people that are native teachers recognize the privilege that you have, and you don't even want to acknowledge that. You don't have to, but please get out of my way. So
I often say wherever I work and whenever I expose these people, whether it's institutions, whether it's the dynamic behind what is going on, my intention is never to discredit this, whether it's the people, whether it's that's the last of my intentions, because I think that if it's in just one place, it can be just in one place. It's something that is
pervasive. It is pervasive. I'm sorry, teacher. It is pervasive. Native speakerism impacts someone who is native, someone's not non-native. And the interesting thing is my approach is I'm like, listen, there can be another way. If learners want there to be another way. There can be another way if learners want there to be another way. What I believe in is that, hey, you speak English naturally, that you own and be proud of who you are and recognize and realize, I'm like, you know what? Accent is the icing on the cake. It's not the mandatory. Again, the aspects of fluency are mandatory. And when people take courses with me, if they want to take courses with me, I try to teach them or share my experience. I'm like, listen, let me tell you what happens when, I've dealt in this situation where it's like, oh, hey, you know what? I was told by certain people you didn't sound black enough, or your accent sounds very white. Well, so I try to share personal experiences and try to equip people in terms of, okay, this is what you might experience. But if you don't have the foundation and you don't have your mind right, it's fine. And try to give people the tools. And my thing is this, there are a lot of learners out there that I believe want to say something, but they don't say anything. Why? Because they don't feel they have the power. I'm like, I'm sorry. That's not, I don't roll that way.
Yeah.
I would rather have somebody not take a class with me or a course with me or don't follow me, because I'm like, you know what? There can be another way when learners want to do that. And interesting, the reason I focus on the learners more so the teachers, because why? It's pure, my old business world. It's, hey, what's up, Oven? OGM. It's pure supply and demand. The students are the consumers are the one that change the market. So even if somebody like doesn't want to necessarily change it, it'll change. Because what I've noticed now is, based on the work that you do, based on the work that others do, it's that, okay, there is a higher evidence of accent. So what's the focus now? we're trying not to say native, non-native, things of that nature.
Yes.
But I've noticed lately that the
Ooh.
content has been on pronunciation.
Yes, true.
So the
true.
system still will maintain itself.
Yes, definitely. Sound
Until the learners want to change that. And
Yeah.
and teacher, you just reminded me of something when we were talking about qualifications, right? I want to
Yeah.
go back to something before I forget it.
Mm-hmm.
One of my OGM Oven's on the phone. I encourage anybody. Like, another reason why I encourage that, I don't want to give people a reason. I encourage anybody that's of color, and we're all of color. Okay, let's get that out there. We're all of color. But I encourage my teachers that are teachers of color, and I encourage my teachers whose mother tongue is not English. Oh, go back and get as much education and certifications and sheepskin as you can. Why? Because you don't want to give people a reason not to give you the job. In my culture, one of the reasons why we did it, or I did it, was in my culture, it was like, wait a minute, I look a particular way. There's a particular bias by people. So it's kind of like, hey, you know what? In my culture, it's like, you know what? You have to work harder than the dominant society. That ain't right. That ain't wrong. That's reality. So get your certifications, get as much education as you can, so you cannot give the person that's hiring you an excuse.
Yes.
So I encourage
and that goes for
to
also
do that.
The native speakers out there. Like I said, I know a lot of people who have been in the business in ELT for the longest time, and they never so much as bothered going out there and getting qualified. And I think that personally, if I were the recruiter or the institution, I wouldn't allow that to happen, simply because it's just not caring, basically.
I'm going to tell you a real life story because the brother's on the phone. Oven English is somebody on Instagram, right? He's followed me back in the day. He's like when I first did my live Instagram, he followed me, right? So he's like an original member. Oven is a teacher. He went back. He was actually going to be in the travel industry, whatever like that. Oven, I'm telling your business, brother. I love you. Oven is from Turkey, right? Yeah. What did Oven do? He went back and he got certified. Now, we talk from time to time because he's my OGM. He got certified. And Oven, if I'm lying, tell me. I said, Oven, real talk, brother. You're going to be a good teacher. You're not native. You know people in your own country, not everyone, but most, discriminate against you. Oven, if I'm lying, then tell him. Discriminate. Go back, get your certification. He went back and got his certification, and now he's busy with teachers. So I encourage, if you know that there are certain obstacles and barriers you face because of the ignorance of other people, I strongly suggest that. Go back and get educated. Don't give people an excuse, because my thing is, I don't know what the challenge is to be, see, Open said that's true. I don't know what the challenge is to be someone who's learning English not as their mother tongue. So that's not an issue that's not something I experience, right? So I definitely encourage people to do that. Yeah. Because you're competing globally. And what happens is, I know this for a fact because I've been in HR, human resources. People sometimes will see what you look like and what your name is, and they will automatically throw your papers or your CV out. Automatically. That ain't right. I'm not just, but it's happened. I've seen it, and could have more qualifications, more so than someone else. So,
it happened to me. My name is Mary, and it's spelled Meri. How many times do you think my CV was thrown out the bin? Just not an English name, or spelled differently, because it is an English name.
So I encourage anybody to do that. It's like, that's the byproduct of native speakerism.
It gives you that extra something to believe in yourself. I think that I wouldn't have had the courage to stand up for myself. Even I'm surrounded by people who are teaching English as their L1, like their dominant language to students who have English as their native language. And working in an international environment, I often have to. Well, I'm a substitute teacher, first of all. So what I had to do, first of all, is remind students that they had to study some grammar and understand how they could improve their writing and speaking skills and all that. And you know what they said to me? And this is like until, I don't know how you, until the age, I'll go with age because the grade system might be different, up until 14, 15, even 16-year-old olds. And they say, why do I have to study this? I speak English already. And I'm like, did you see what you've written here? I mean, can you see the things that you can improve there? They just don't find the connection because they've just been told, fine, you can do it. That's
And
it.
I think, right. And I think the thing is this, listen.
And can I just say something? They
Yes,
can't.
ma'am, I'm sorry. No, they can't. No, not at all. Because writing is just because I might be like, C1 or C2 in speaking does not mean, and I'm a native English speaker. I learned how to write. I learned how to write, and I'm English, right? I'm from America.
I'm still learning.
My writing, I've shared this with the ATW family. Most people, when they entered college, they entered English 100. No, I'm sorry, they entered English 101. I entered English 100 because I had basic writing skills, right? But I'm American. Most people by design go back to your native language. What do you do better? Speaking in your native language or writing in your native language?
What you do most of.
What do you both, right? So writing is an art or a skill. I think the thing is that for me, it's like there's certain words that I wish. I try to do this with the ATW family. I don't necessarily know if I'm successful at it all the time. You would need to ask them because I haven't done a lot of lives lately. But I try to use inclusive language, and that's not being woke. That is not being politically correct. That is being true to what, number one, the definition of English is, and my sense of integrity. Again, I like to say speak English naturally. I like to say how can we broaden the horizons of it. I like to give the learners accountability on that because they're the ones that change the industry if they want to. I've asked the ATW family a lot of times, where is your representation? If English is a global international language, do you find it of value? Do learners find it of value to see the full diversity of the language, or do you just want to see people from a particular region, a particular accent, and a particular hue, and think that all that English is?
I would say, do you select the people you do business with in terms of, oh, I'm going to do business with you because you sound okay to me, I like the way you look, or do you just? I mean, you can't be that selective. I mean, you can if we're talking about specific, environments. However, you don't really choose the people you encounter on a daily basis, right?
Certainly you don't. And there's a very fine line. There's a very fine line, personal statement. I have no problem with preference.
No, everyone has a preference. I mean,
there's a very fine line between preference and subconscious prejudice that is impacted by native speakerism.
Yeah.
Because years ago, I did a video, and in the video I said, is the ELT industry a racist industry? And a lot of people were like, what? Both my white brothers and sisters and my brothers and sisters of color. Now, let's keep it 100. My sense of 100. That's not the first time that, that's something new. No, it was not. I just dared to share, because when I do content now, I just do content for me. And if people can be blessed by it or learn from it, it's fine. So I guess the thing is, discrimination exists in the world, and most people would say it exists in the world and their country, and not just the United States of America. If people would say that it exists in their country, they somehow would think that the ELT industry is oblivious of that or impervious of that. No, it doesn't, and it shapes it down. So I have no problem with preference. Like, if you prefer what you prefer, that's fine. If you prefer only native teachers that only speak British English with British accent or American accent and look one particular color, fine, do you. But please do not get mad at other people for showing the true variety of the language. And what I would say is, what I would challenge people on is like, okay, do you follow content providers from your own country? Because there are a lot of learners that I know they don't want to learn English from anybody in their own country, let alone speak English.
Yeah.
So tell me how is that preference or subconscious prejudice? And by the way, for those people that only want to speak with the native, you can do that. Yet if you're going to do courses, they're going to charge you more. And I might say something that might be a little disrespectful. Most natives don't want to speak to you unless they're your family, your chosen family, your friends or associates. Teaching's a job, and they're going to charge you more money. So most
Sure.
natives don't want to speak with you. So if you want to save money, you might want to speak English with whoever you want to, but not to speak English from your own particular country or who you relate to. To me, that's crazy if it's a global international language. Or why is it that some teachers, again, now I get it because of slavery in one's mind, because of native speakerisms. There are some teachers that have to sound like a native and have native accent. Why? Because of exactly what you said. They would not get a job. They would not be supported by their own particular community. So ultimately, it goes back to full circle, teacher, where for me, it's the community, it's the students, it's the consumers, because they're the ones that ultimately change the pattern. Will it change anytime soon? I don't know. Would I want it to do? Yes, I would. What I just try to do is that I just try to share my thoughts, my perspective. And a lot of people, if they agree with it, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine as well.
Just going back on what you said about the fact that when someone decides to do a lesson with you, they're getting the parts that you want to be teaching, also about your character. I think that
She froze. Okay, so teacher, very quickly, you froze on StreamYard, so on Instagram. I heard part of your statement, so I'm on Instagram right now because there's just me on there. But refresh it because there's just me. Yeah. I heard that part. I think we can agree to I disagree with you, and we can agree to disagree. And here's my thing: you, by the very nature of who you teach, what I'm defining is culture, way of life. So let me make my argument, and we can agree to disagree. I bring my culture to the door. I bring who I am, my language, my experience, my clothes. So that's from my perspective, where it's kind of like I'm teaching based on the fact that I'm American who lives in Saudi. I'm teaching Saudi culture, whatever that, bringing that to the perspective. My aspect is that when I'm teaching, for me, the way my approach of teaching is, I'm like, English is about life. So I'm drawing my experiences, whether it's like as it relates to, yes, the methodology of teaching, whatever, but I'm also bringing in, hey, have you ever thought about discrimination? Hey, this is what goes on in America. I'm bringing the average. So for me, I bring my culture into that's my thing. So maybe we disagree about it. Okay. Yes. Okay. Then we agree. We're saying the same thing differently, but I think it goes to your better point. Whereas I think what's important is, and I encourage this a lot to the ATW family. Whereas is if you are looking for like a course, or you're looking for a teacher, whether it's face to face and online, it's important to hold on a minute. It's important to look at. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, you're back. Cool. Okay. So it's important to look at overall, I encourage people to do this where it's kind of like, listen, you can have preference, but if you're looking for teachers, the first thing, look at qualifications, but look at overall personality experience, because exactly here I am, hey, great.
Because you bring to the table what you are and what you've become, and it's not necessarily
Exactly.
just one thing. And that's why when you do have this encounter and you meet a person, you don't just meet one facade or just one face of that. It's just the whole global thing that that person brings to the table. And that's why I think that that's what you're saying. You're saying it should be, the revolution should start, from bottom up.
Right, and I think people create that. And to Anna, I'm sorry, very quickly, to Anna, who said, but you can't teach British culture if you don't live there or know much about it. Well, I certainly would agree with you. I've never learned in Britain, so I would agree with that comment. But to teacher's point, what I would say is I bring all of my experiences there. So it's the whole person. Here I am, Anna, as an American who lives in Saudi Arabia, I'm an immigrant in there. So I have a perspective of the Saudi culture. Now, Anna, if you just want to learn about British culture, then I'm not the right one for you.
Exactly.
No problem. It is what it is. So that's the beautiful thing about teaching. It's like you have a diversity of thing. But Anna, one of the things that you made me think about is the following. What I try to do is that, great, you know what, Anna, I love that you mentioned that. Hey, I'm American, great. What I think is try to make me a better human being is to learn about other cultures. How interesting it is on others. Again, you can
But
learn.
do you need an English teacher to teach you about culture?
Exactly. Do I? No, not when I have social media, not when I have British friends or whatever.
Yes.
What I would encourage people to do is, it's like, hey, if we have internet and we're learning about English, hey, is it possible that we can learn about Singaporean English, Barbadian English, Armenian English?
Yes.
Why is
It's just
again?
like,
It's this one tunnel focus.
that's a thing.
And then again, you like what you like. I'm just having you think about something. I don't know where you are and where you live, Anna, but for me, what I think is important, what I like to do is I like to learn about different Englishes and different cultures and different experiences. And again, what I think it happens with native speakerism is, it's again, we're focused on Britain, we're focused on America. Nothing to matter with that because I'm American.
Yes.
But does everybody speak like me? No, nor should they. And by the way, what is the value, in my opinion, of understanding different accents and dialects? Well, particularly if I'm in the business world, I better understand that, because everybody's not going to speak like me.
Yes, exactly. As you were saying, there's the majority of the world is not speaking a specific accent and is not using a specific pronunciation.
Not at all. But learners are walking around. A lot of learners are walking around in shame, and that's difficult to think. And when you say, teacher Miriam, why it doesn't change, because sometimes it's easier for people to deflect and not face their reality. And I'm not judging that.
Yes.
My thing is that
but
when
I
people
think
choose
that,
to
let me
face
interrupt you there for a second,
Sure.
because I think it's really important that teachers, I'm not trying to boast, about myself, but the fact that whichever class I enter now, I'm, my social media name is the non-native speaker, and I kind of flaunt that to an extreme and say this to everyone. And I'm like, all right, I'm teaching you English today. So your L1 is English. I'm a non-native speaker. I'm teaching you English. Does that ring a bell? I mean, does that say anything about the fact that doesn't matter where, does it? And before, I think I wouldn't have had the courage to kind of do so, because I felt I had the imposter syndrome. I always felt like I was, I didn't belong in the teacher category just because that's what I felt. And many times I was refused, okay, you can't do this because, right, you studied in Italy. Well, yeah, but I'm speaking in English all my life. I have a qualification as a teacher of English. Why are you judging me based on where I learned, where I studied? Look at what I have studied. Why are you, basing your judgment off of?
No, and teacher, you make a valid point. Because I think that's one of the things, like I like to, like I do a club, the ATW club, every Thursday night, where we do vocabulary and speak, and we talk a lot about these issues. And I think what you said is important. Two quick things. We all come to a certain awareness, and we all choose to pick and choose and fight our battles and what we come to. I never would have been like this where I came into my understanding, I mean, I knew it exists, but where I tried to use my voice and have used my voice in my limited platform.
And we're going back to the initial question that I asked you. There you go.
Yeah, is when I dropped that video. I don't know if he's on the call, but shout out to living legend Leon, teacher Leon. When I dropped that video on YouTube, is the ELT industry a racist industry? Is when I found my voice. And that's when I just was like, hey, you know what?
Yes.
Stop worrying about what other people think. Stop worrying about doing content and what. That's when I dropped it. So shout out goes to living legend Leon, because I remember talking to him about that. So that's point one. I think we all, in a certain well, I can't speak for 7 billion people. I had that. I had imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm not going to do this content. I'm not going to say this fact because I'm afraid what learners are going to say. Oh, I'm not going to say this. I'm not going to do a live Instagram.
Whenever I look at vocabulary, when people say, how do you pronounce this? I say, well, you can say it this way, you can say it that way, you can say it this way, you can, unless something is like impeding communication and understanding, I don't comment on that. And I love it when some maybe native might, observe and say, oh, why didn't you correct this pronunciation? And I explain that there isn't just one way of pronouncing a word. And, open your minds around, language is evolving and it's changing. And it's something that is constantly, there are different expressions being used, different ways of things being pronounced. And it's all part of,
It can be all part, yet if learners and the system as a whole doesn't want, I think that's the challenge, because again, I try to be, I'm very competitive with myself. I don't compete with other people. So I love the aspect that you said, imposter syndrome. I had that. Oh no, I'm not gonna, oh my God, I can't bring up this topic because my fellow colleagues are gonna be mad or be like, whatever. There's content, again, we grow, we change, we evolve. I'm grateful for anybody that's done a live with me, whether they've invited me or had a host. But real talk, when I came, for me, this is when it started with that. And then I literally called myself a hypocrite. I was like, William, you're a hypocrite. I was like, you're telling people, no, I did. I remember when this was. I was like, William, you're telling the ATW family to walk the talk, walk the walk, and talk the talk. And you're not practicing what you preach.
Yourself. Sure.
And then I was like, that's when it changed. And so, I could remember, and I'm grateful to this, no name. I'm grateful to people that, I did lives with in the past. But since I found my sense of authenticity, they're no longer there. I don't have a problem with that because their message and my message is different. I might be, that's fine. So to me, what are learners going to do? For me, what is usually important is representation and having learners, if they want to do self-study, that's fine. But if they're going to make an investment in themselves, and whether it's a language school or whether it's a teacher face-to-face or online, it is to find their authenticity, ask the right questions, and to think critically. And, I'll share this with you because some people were like, why haven't you, they were like, hey, Teacher Will, I haven't seen you on Instagram. Where you been? You haven't doing a lot of posts. I'm still active. I'm still here. To be honest with you, is a lot of people, not everyone, I made a promise to ATW family that I was like, listen, I'll still be doing lives and things of that nature, but I'll be very honest with you, teacher. One of the reasons why I haven't been as live as possible is because I'm like, you know what? A lot of people don't want to hear it. And I don't have a problem with that. I would rather use my time more valuable with people that want to set themselves free and have a different narrative than to sit back and be, I'm a slave. Yeah. So that's my thing. It's like, if you're comfortable because I have no right to judge anybody else. But if you want to keep English in a box, or if you want to only define it one way, that's fine. I'm not the right teacher for you. And so let me spend my energy and method, whatever, because at the end of the day, it's my truth. It's my experience. I just want people to be free. And I believe that people have a right to represent themselves.
Definitely. And there's nothing wrong with a student choosing a teacher based off of, it's a social act that of, relating to a teacher, finding things in common, having things in common to speak about. You can't totally, if there's the relationship doesn't start or starts off on the wrong foot, it happens in real life. You meet someone, you don't have a feeling, you have certain,
It's a partnership. It is a partnership, and
Yes.
that's the thing. And again, I mean, again, one of the reasons why I'm still active but not as much is because I'll be honest. I'll be even more honest with you. It really hurt me and I had to detach. And I'm normally good at compartmentalizing, but I had to detach because it literally caused me. I'm like, why are people spending their money, which is their money? Why are people spending their money and listening to content providers that are telling them they're less than?
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, William, you need to back away for a little bit, because if they're not willing to fight their own battle, I can't do that for that. So devote your time and that's why. So I mean, I'm because I was doing lives like 5-6 days a week.
Yeah.
And
I
so
think that's
realized,
where, I kind of got familiar with your content and what you were talking about, and I agreed with most of it. I still think that in some cases it's just that they're not informed. I feel like I have these aha moments a lot with people that I talk to on a daily basis, and whether they're teachers, students, whomever I encounter, whenever I go on, and I'm talking about this a lot, obviously, because I really had this intention for years. I wanted to dedicate myself into kind of educating those around me of all the discriminatory behaviors that I was facing, trying to find a job. And every time I would get further in terms of education, I thought that more doors were going to open up, and nothing really changed. And it was frustrating. And the more I speak to students and people, the more I realize that they don't give it a thought. You're talking about critical thinking. Oh, I wish people would think, and then think critically would come.
Well, no, I agree. Two quick things. Number one, I think that's the byproduct of native speakerism.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to be, I mean, I think that's the value of social, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm on social media. Yet social media is for entertainment and design.
But social media needs more people like you and more people like me. I'm going to put myself in there to spread this awareness. And I think that
teacher, can I play devil's advocate with you for a second on that?
Sure.
I agree. I mean, I think, as many people that choose to say the message, that's fine. What I would play devil's advocate with you on this is not something that you and I have started talking about in 2020 or 2021. This has been around for a while. So I wonder if it's blockage and denial, number one. And number two,
what do you mean by that?
Meaning that okay, there's part of me that I agree with you. There's part of me, I'm torn on this. I'm actually in prayer about this. There's part of me where I believe, I'm like, you know what? Yes, it's constant reminder. It's constant reminder of like, hey, it being inundated native speakerism, right? But there's another part of me that I'm like, oh, learners know it's too hard for them to deal with. It's that constant battle where it's like they know, but it's kind of like, you know what? If something bothers me or hurts me, and I'm too scared to look at, I'm comfortable with what I know. Even though what I know might not be good for me, it's even more scary if I do something else. So what I would make the argument to you is that I do think there's a percentage of learners that know that. They just don't care. Or they're not able to deal with it at this moment.
Yes, we're now, trying to think we won't know the percentage of this,
right?
But
in my opinion,
it's more people that haven't thought about. I want to give credit. To
you know what? And perhaps you're right, and you're more optimistic than I am. I'm an optimist realist, or maybe I'm a little jaded or less jaded than you. So you might be right. Maybe people have not really thought. I
don't think we can find out anytime. Right. I don't think we can find it out in the immediate future or in the near future. But
the other thing that you want to, this is what I thought of. I think what is, I'm going to get shot for this. I think what I've realized in addition to that is, I think sometimes the messenger, from the perspective of the student and the learner, I do think sometimes the messenger is more important than the message. And I came to that realization. So, I mean, with my little limited platform, I recognize that, okay, I'm able to touch you, I'm able to, but I do think, and I'm going to be my own sense of integrity, I do think that the messenger for the learners is more important than the message. And what I mean by that is,
do you mean by what you mean by that is that more native speakers should
no, well, no, I'm going to go a little deeper. I think that from the definition of what most people learning English is, if English is associated native speakerism with one particular hue, one particular region, one particular sound, and one particular color, I think that that might have more of an impact than I would. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And that's just, I mean, I'm grateful for people that follow me, but that's just a reality. Because historically speaking is, if a Black person or a person of color says that, oh, there they go again.
Yes,
They're complaining. They're seeing color.
With native speakerism and in the ELT world specifically, it's just like we're addressing a part of what is, the bigger picture that is out there, and that is discrimination per se.
Right. So I listen, there was, okay, real talk. I won't use names. There was a colleague of mine, they happened to be of Latino descent. We were having a similar topic discussion.
Yeah.
And I had the same conversation with a colleague, one of my white brothers, one of my white sisters. Race does matter in the ELT industry. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's a reality. So
it matters. Where does it not matter?
Right. So I think sometimes so what I've realized is I'm like, you know what, listen, sometimes, that's why human beings, we create allies and we create partnership. Because here's the thing, it matters, because my thing, again, it all comes down to intent. Personally speaking, there was an individual, perfect example, and I feel comfortable using this name because I respect this gentleman a lot. Recently, somebody well-known in the industry dropped a video, Christian Kangaroo English, that he's like my brother. We call each other brothers, right? He dropped a video like, hey, do you need to sound like a native? One of our colleagues sent me a message and was like, wait a minute, Teacher Will, you said the same thing. And I had to remind this person, because we don't even know names. I was like, yeah, we did, but Christian has his way, I have my way. The message is out there, but the messenger is important. True. Now, I mean no disrespect to Christian. I was like, I had to say to this person, I was like, who's Christian? What does he look like? And she was like, oh, but that makes me mad. Literally, she said that. That pisses me off. That makes me mad. And I was like, listen, you can be mad. I can't tell you how to feel or what not to feel. I said, but the messenger is more important than the message.
Yeah.
In certain instances. So I think for people that are sincere and native speakerism, it has no color, it has no ethnicity. I mean, there might be winners and losers around that. But I do think that sometimes the messenger is more important than the message. Because if Teacher Will says something, oh, he's angry. He's the angry black. I'm not the angry Black man. I'm just sharing my perspective. Versus if I have my white brother and sister say it, then it might go over more. I mean, that's human. That's not, you know what I mean? Sometimes you need people in-house that has a similar cultural perspective. And that's right. That's why I think it's important for people that, and you can make money from it. So, I had to recognize that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of like, you know what? I do a lot of stuff now behind the scenes and trying to encourage other people to say, I mean, am I going to stop talking about it? No.
I think both you and I, we don't do this out of, I don't think we're looking for clients. Or
no, because I could be like, oh, sound like American and sound like a native and be like, follow the standard model and get like everything else.
Exactly. I feel like, again, I'm going to a bit of an imposter, because everyone on Instagram, all the teachers there, they're kind of trying to sell a service. They're trying to sell themselves as, I don't have a time for that. My time is spent simply creating content that might raise awareness. I'm doing conferences, investing my own money to go to places and it's not just to feed my ego. It's just that it has, personally for me, it has a healing effect.
Right. And I have no problem. And to your point, listen, I have no, like, this is my thing. Social media could be anything to anybody else. I have no problem if anybody sells courses or things of that nature. I've done it before. Like, hey, fine. For me, what is important is the way in which I do it, and to give learners a different perspective. My thing is, I'm like, listen, I would encourage anybody, like, listen, maybe I'm an optimist. Maybe I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I come from a group of people that have been depressed, that did not have rights, that were beat by dogs. Why would I want to do that to another person? Now, if you
Yes.
want to do that, that's fine. I'm not going to do that. So I'm encouraged when people take the ATW class with me and they're like, oh my God, Teacher Will, you're teaching me about English, but you're motivating me and you're inspiring me. There was a brother that shared with me yesterday when we had a class. He applied for a job that basically told him that on the interview that you had to be native. He applied for the job anyway, got the job, and then shared with me. He's like, teacher, I never would have done that if I didn't take your class. That's why I'm in it.
Oh, yes.
That's why
I mean, because with the conferences or with just talking about it, there are plenty of people who talk about it. I'm not the only one. But as you're saying, the messenger is important. Every person can kind of relate to.
And the learner needs to share. Last point I got.
Yeah.
The learner needs to share their story.
Definitely.
That's why I always say representation is important, because what happens is, or at least in my experience, what happens is both from the student side and the teacher side.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Teacher Will, oh my God, I wish I could say what you said. I don't. Well, maybe you will and maybe you won't. But let me tell you something. I'm fighting my own battles. Don't expect me to fight it because you want me to go out there, and yet you'll be a hypocrite when you go to the dominant ask me how I know, because it's happened to me anyway, where it's like, oh, that dominant teacher out there, whatever like that. You want me to fight your battle? No, I'm not fighting. Teacher will fight his own battle. But the learner, their story, your story matters. That's what all I try to do with my content and all I try to do with my courses. But definitely my content is to sit back and be like, you know what? You matter. You are enough. And whatever you choose to do is fine as long as you can live with your consequences. But do not allow someone else to put you in a box and you to put yourself in a box or be a slave in your mind because you don't think that you're better or you're trying. I'm not down with that. Because if that was the case, I still would be physically enslaved. So I do it because I'm like, you know what? Somebody sacrificed for me.
Definitely.
And paved the way for me.
I'm going to fight my own battles.
Sure. Right. It's called you pass it for it.
Yeah,
That's what I do.
I think that I believe in that extra push simply because I needed that extra push. I didn't stand up for myself. And so I thought that, and that's why I'm coming from this perspective of saying that many people just underestimate or undervalue themselves, and they think that they're not worthy enough just because we've been fed this narrative of not being
fed it. I was fed it. I got real talk. I got on Instagram too. Oh my God. Why don't I have this? Why don't I have the number of followers? Why don't I look like this? What?
Yeah.
Yo, that's all a process. We're geared. Like when I came into the realization, thank you, Teacher Leon. Thank you, Teacher Christian. Thank you, Halima. Thank you, Ali. Well, I came to the thing. I'm like, wait a minute, William. Be authentic. Do you. Do content for you. And if somebody values it, it's fine. It's a process. But you have to do it for you. And if they understand it, fine. If they don't, fine. But do you? And that's a process, because oftentimes we tell learners, like, be proud of who you are, be a learner. Let me tell you something. In my own life, it was much easier to be a follower and a leader. When you decide to have an authentic voice, it's easier. You'll be ridiculed, scandalize your name, be talked about. People will smile on your face.
I keep telling that. Yeah.
Providers will be like, teachers will be like, oh, I want to do a live with you. But then they get a phone call from one of the major peoples in the planet. Ask me how I know. That ain't got, oh, I almost swore, don't swear. That has nothing to do with me. Yeah. But that is about So when I go into that teacher and I start thinking about courses or whatever like that, that's just share my life experience. Listen, y'all, the world is cruel. Like the world's a blessing, but the world
Oh,
is cruel.
sure.
In one way, shape, or form, somebody's not gonna like you. They ain't gonna like your hair, they ain't gonna like your face, your gender, your religion, not religion, who you that ain't got nothing
And they're
to
going to
do.
have a lot of opinions on
And
you,
they're
whether
gonna
or not
right.
you're the
Their
best person
opinion
or
of
the
you. That's why when people drop a reel, they get mad at me. I'm like, listen, I got this from my mama. I'm like, your opinion of me is just that. If you ain't my family, if you ain't my chosen family, if you ain't
Yes,
paying my
yes, yes,
bills,
yes.
I'm gonna pay you no mind. But that's very hard for a learner to understand, particularly if English is not their first language or if they come from cultures and societies that are there. But
Of
that's
course.
it. So I hope people follow me by like, yo, is this guy teaching me? I would hope, and then I'm done. I would hope people follow me by saying, wait a minute, is this guy teaching me English?
Or
But
there's
he's
something more
teaching me
there.
life and he's trying to inspire me and be the best. That's why I would hope people
Yeah,
follow me.
definitely. Definitely. Because you want to achieve more than that. It's just not in the because that's what you want to be.
That's
That's
my
what
niche.
gives you
That's my
satisfaction. That's
passion.
why you love your job.
Right. That's my
And
niche. That's my passion. That's what I love.
yeah,
I can do a pronunciation class. I can do a verb. I can do it, but that's not
yeah,
my passion. My
exactly. So you
passion is
choose
I'm
to
like,
do what you do best and you do you.
do
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you? That's
You
the
do
do.
you.
That's the sub theme. Do you in 2022? So it's
Exactly. And
courage.
there may be a student who just wants to focus on that particular, and there's a teacher for that out there. And you can find them. Thankfully, we're well connected with, one another. You can always find what suits you best. But I think, yeah, just being true, to yourself. I don't want to sound too cheesy with this, but it is what it is. I mean, this is exactly what we're there for. And we have
And it's
long,
process and it's work and
yeah,
it's okay, you know what I mean? It's like at least if somebody takes the journey, like the biggest thing, like at least if you're willing to take the journey, that's my thing. I just, from my point of perspective, is I'm like, again, do you in 2022, but just like please at least consider if you're gonna spend money or you're gonna follow a content there was a content provider that is very well known in the industry that I was on a live Instagram about, and they literally called their learners assholes, and people followed this person.
oh my
And I'm
God.
sitting here, and they still, and I'm like,
Yeah.
really?
What's the intention there?
Right? So that's my only thing is I'm like, yo, giving, like just being like, hey, you know what? Be proud of who you are and make choices that work for you. And once you make that choice, fine. But please do
Yes.
not spend your money. Please do not spend your money and support somebody that's going to tear you down. I do
Mm.
you just get out of my
You do
way?
you? Yes, 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 yes. No, I think, yeah, the big takeaway here is we have to start questioning what we are ourselves as well as to what we're following, the reasons why we're following this person. What exactly do we want to obtain from an experience or from a teacher or from a course? And what is the intention behind the person that is also giving us or feeding us the narratives, the stories that he or she is feeding us? What is the reason behind the content that one person is producing, right? I think we have to be more ethically aware of what is happening around us, whether it is discrimination, native speakerism, how certain words are used, and it has become part, like we accept it.
Yeah,
We
I'm not, and
accept it
that's it,
very
right,
easily, and
right,
the
and
times have
right.
passed, like
Yeah, I'm not right. I'm not, and that's the thing. Like, if you want to accept it, that's fine. I'm not. Like, I remember somebody said, I think it was, Teacher Leon said, like, he said something brilliantly last year. He said, it's 2021 and we're still talking about this. If you want to accept it, that's fine. But I don't have to accept it. And just because I address it does not mean that I am woke or that I'm
no,
politically correct, because I'm the least politically correct person I know. I'm respectful, but I'm not politically correct. So that's my thing. I'm like, no, I don't have to accept. I've oppressed myself. Now I've
yes,
oppressed myself. I've recognized that. Now I'm trying to live my most authentic self. So I don't have to accept where you are. I have to accept your opinion. I have to respect your opinion, but I don't have to accept or respect the fact that I'm going to tear down another human being. I'm not doing that. So if you don't like it, bye.
And to extend that to ELT, these discriminatory practices are against the law. The fact that a school or a person can call you and ask you your nationality before giving you a job, or you need to record those conversations and sue them. You know what I mean? Because there are laws in place, because discriminating against, nationality, race, color, gender, whatever it is, we've gone past that. The thing is that what really makes me angry is that we're still looking at this and we're still going through it, and no one is really doing anything.
That's on an individual level, and I think, again, when.
But you say individual level, but we're not. This is not something that happens to one person.
It does not. But I think what happens is
it's just that people don't speak up about it.
Right? Because it's always the risk versus reward. It's always like, is my voice heard? And sometimes people. Okay, let me say it like this. Sometimes people want to speak up, but they don't live in cultures, society that are conducive of that. Number one.
Well, recently there was this English teacher who sued the school that didn't even give her the chance of being interviewed, and she won the battle because she had a lot of colleagues that said, okay, you need to go against them, do something about it, and she won the case.
Where was this?
This was very recently. It's this Greek teacher. Her name is Rachel Sateri. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right.
Teacher, my thing is this. I love Greece. I've been to Greece. I hope to be back. That is completely different from other parts of the world. There are certain parts of the world that you're not able to do that. So I agree. I think. But I think
this happened though in Germany. So she's Greek, but right. She sued in linguist.
Well, I think that if I lived in other parts or other continents of the world, it might not necessarily be. All I'm saying is, yes, I do think that, but people ultimately have to figure out, like, okay, is it worth it? Will I be supported? Sometimes people sometimes people want to speak up, and they might not have the freedom to do that. They might be persecuted, right? So I agree with you in theory. I just think it's important to live in other variables, because oftentimes there's certain privileges that I have in the United States of America in terms of suing, I might not have in other parts of the world.
Yes, sure,
so
sure.
That's why I just said that.
But I think that if I had, like, if I knew what I know today, when I was, applying for certain jobs, and people literally told to my face that they weren't going to hire me because of my origin, I would have.
Oh, yeah. I understand.
Behaved differently.
Yeah. But the beautiful thing is that we know what we know. I mean, I think what is important is that what we kind of talked about is we give the beauty of this live and the content that you do is that you share yourself, you share your talents, you share your experience to give people options, and then ultimately they will do what is best for them.
Definitely.
And then, but for
me, just make also the informed decision. I mean, I think I do what I do to give more confidence to the people who feel that they might not be doing the right thing, or simply because, they can never achieve that certain level of appreciation by a modern society, or whatever they want to call it, or by their colleagues, or by their recruiters, or by their students, or whatnot. And I also hope that recruiters themselves, or the institutions, would start questioning themselves as to who they are hiring, why they're hiring them. Is it based off their skills? Is it based on
nationality and color?
Yes.
But it's changing. I mean, hopefully it's changing. I mean, but again, slowly but surely it's changing. I mean, and
I hope so.
Well, we're living in it. We're living in it. I mean, again, it's like, this is where I have a little bit of optimism, because again, you made me a little bit more optimistic, because again, it's conversations like this. Sometimes people, if I'm living in oppression, I'll say it like this. If I'm living in oppression, and if I'm living in mental slavery, I have to hear it over and over and over and over again, because why would I think there's something that could be new when I'm living in that? So certainly, I think the thing is unfortunately or fortunately, when you live in that, then I'm just reminded of the fact that sometimes change does not necessarily happen as quickly I would want it. but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not changing. That
True.
gives me solace.
True. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. And I often say I'm not expecting a change to occur anytime. I don't expect it during my lifetime. Maybe it will take a century. I don't know how long it will take,
Right.
but it has to start somewhere. And I want to feel that I've
right.
contributed.
And you're part of it. Right. And you're part of it. And I mean, and that's my thing. It's this kind of like, if learners.
And you know, the beauty of it is that I am, because whenever I spoke about it today with at least 3 different people, and their faces literally light up, because that's again why I say I don't think they speak or consider the issue. Most of the people don't consider the issue. I want to think well of the humanity in general. I think that they just don't see it. They don't put themselves in your shoes. If they haven't experienced it firsthand, they don't realize it. And if they haven't mastered, or they're not bilingual or polyglot, or they just don't get it, that you can be just as good.
And right. And that's
or even better.
Right.
And I'm not saying, again, there are cases where they're worse, they're better. That's not the point. The thing is that it's a skill set. Knowing.
And I think that the language, right. Well, that's the value in talent you added. That's why I think that, hopefully learners will start being aware of the language they use, the thoughts that they're starting to use. And it's based on the work that you do and other people do. It's like, to just, be mindful of the language and stuff. So that's really a testament to you and all the good. And I'm glad you said that, because you've given me a little bit more hope, because to be honest with you,
I definitely think the majority, I'm glad that I'm doing this, because it either validates those who are feeling the same way that I felt, or it has this healing effect, and people who have even gone past this and they're not even talking about it anymore. They're like, oh, I used to do that. I'm like,
well, I guess what I would say is this. I'm glad to hear this. My thing is, and perhaps this is egotistical on my part, and I'll readily admit this, actions speak louder than words. I hear a lot of people hear it sometimes, but then, at the end of the day, talk is cheap for me. And that could be judgment, and I'll readily
I have to still see that.
There are a lot of people I've had conversations around, but at the end of the day, they're not going to do anything to disinfect their coin. And I'm not mad at them on that. But yet it's kind of like, oh, they'll have the conversation, but oh no. Because again, we come to it when we're supposed to come to it. So what my hope and my prayer is like, again, going back to the messengers, that learners will demand it, and that other content providers out there across all different hues, in terms of being human, will sit back and be like, hey, can I try this? Because if you don't, it's kind of like, hey, what does that matter? It's kind of like you had a conversation and you're still perpetuating the system of this oppression.
To me, it's really in the details. It's like those things that we say that have become normal. Oh, she's Armenian, but she speaks English. Or, oh, he's Ukrainian, but he's English. What does that even mean? Or, he's from this, but, and I had that a lot. Oh,
right.
But I lived in the States. Oh, but I don't normally say I studied in Malaysia for 3 years.
Right.
Malaysia has its official language is English.
Right.
And it's just that people don't associate Malaysia with English, right?
And teacher, and I think when we have these conversations, I think it's allowed, and I have to say this because I think I learned this. I think when we have these conversations, it's meeting people where they are, and a sense of empathy and understanding and non-judgment. Because oftentimes when you talk about like non-speakerism or discrimination or race, or somebody gets it and somebody doesn't, I can't expect somebody to, I was guilty of this. So let me admit this years ago. Oh, why don't you get it? Why don't you get it? Well, wait a minute. They haven't lived it. So why do I expect them to get it? Like, exactly. I'm sorry. Like, if you're a woman and I'm a man, which we are, and then you tell me something, I'm like, oh, or if you're black and I'm not, or if I'm black and you're not black, what, you should get it. And I think sometimes it's having these conversations, meeting people where they are, as long as the intent is right with an aspect of learning. I don't like fake people, but I think that's important, because oftentimes I think when people get in these conversations, there's so much pain or healing or hurt experience to go that sometimes we don't need to hear. So I say that because I remember I was talking to a colleague of ours that was white, and she was like, yo, I saw your video. Your video offended me. But then I had to take a step back and be like, wait a minute, did it really offend me?
Yeah.
Maybe I need to look at my own stuff. And I think it's allowing for conversations to just be human.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the part I like about social media, because it does, it's edutainment, or however you want to call it, infotainment. But it does kind of sometimes, when you've succeeded at making content that can actually speak to a multitude, a variety of people, or even just that one person, I think that's already, a big achievement, because just one mentality, just a tweak, a little shift in a mentality can go a long way. And you never know who that person is and how that might affect someone else's life. It can kind of have a ripple effect, and or a butterfly effect. And that's just, it blows my mind as to, we should be having more of these conversations, just because they're important. It's necessary. If we're not having these conversations, nothing really comes of there. The change does not happen.
The teacher should have it, and then hopefully and I hope that the learners will demand those. That's my thing.
Yes,
I hope that learners will demand those things, because that's we all have our niches and focus. That's just where I'm focused on. For me, I want the learners to have it. And if they don't, that's great. I'm still going to have it, but it is what it is. What else you got for me, teacher?
I think you've dedicated so much time, and I'm so thankful of the fact that you stayed on for an hour and a half, even more than that. So I can't thank you enough, really, for giving me your time. This input has been, I think, very, very validating in terms of, native speakerism in ELT. Really, I haven't even checked if we have any questions related to this. We have questions, but they're really questions, as we're not being teachers today. We're not going to answer grammar questions or how you can learn to speak in a certain way.
How you can learn to speak? Hey, you got free resources. You can go on the internet and social media, and if you need help, contact Teacher Mary, and there it is. You got a virtual clever teacher.
No. I have no time to be giving additional lessons, extras, not right now. Even though, to tell the truth, I do have on my website, I do have one-to-one encounters, but currently I'm not taking on any new students.
Okay. Well, find a teacher that works for you. There it is.
Exactly. Find a teacher that works for you, and definitely don't judge them based off of where they are from, and look at what they can share with you. What is that additional value that you're looking for in that teacher, and character-wise and personality-wise, if it's a good fit. I wouldn't say, obviously what we're talking about hopefully has kind of brought up the topic of, critical thinking, and choose the person that is
critical thinking. Listen, if there's nothing, learners, that you believe are ATW family, please remember this. Critical thinking, I'll leave you with three things: mindset, critical thinking, and representation. Those are the three things I will leave them with.
Yes. Thanks again, Teacher Will. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to keep the conversation going.
If you ever need me to do it again, listen, thank you very much for having me. If you ever need me to do it again, I believe in support. I believe in sharing, and because it's important. So I want to thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. I forgot, what time is it? Have a wonderful evening.
Yes, night. I'm going to bed straight after.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Bye.